Trump. And we all know for the future of this country, we've got to defeat Donald Trump. It will be our campaign that defeats Donald Trump. Now, in poll after poll, national polls and in statewide polls, especially those in battleground states, turns out that in almost every instance, we beat Donald Trump by much greater margins than does Secretary Clinton. In fact, there was just an NBC poll, I think it came out today. It had Hillary Clinton defeating Donald Trump by 3 points. We were defeating him by 15 points. But it is, polls go up and polls go down. But what is most important in terms of understanding which campaign will decisively defeat Trump is you. Look around here. Look around. And what you will see here in Irvine is what I have seen all over this country. And that is millions of people who are prepared to stand up and fight back, people who are prepared to take on Wall Street, take on the greed of corporate America, take on the fossil fuel industry, take on the pharmaceutical industry. And when you have that kind of energy of people who are prepared to stand up and fight back, that means you have a large voter turnout. And the secret of American politics is that when voter turnout is low, when people are demoralized, when people give up on the political process, that's when Republicans win. But when people are energized and are prepared to transform this country and fight for their kids and their parents, we will have large voter turnouts, progressives and Democrats win. And I very much appreciate the Bernie, but let me tell you something. Ain't gonna be Bernie alone who does it. All right? I am the only candidate for president who will tell you a harsh truth. And that truth is, given the nature of American economics and politics today, no president can do it alone. We need a political revolution. You are the revolutionaries. This is a fight we have got to wage together. Now, it is true that Wall Street has endless supplies of money, and I mean endless. It is true that corporate greed is such that they are shutting down plants in America and moving to China. It is true that the corporate media will tell you everything you don't need to know, but very little about what you do need to know. It is true that billionaires and their super PACs are buying elections. But at the end of the day, guess what is more powerful than Wall Street and corporate America and wealthy campaign control? You are. And the truth is that if we do not allow the Donald Trumps of the world to divide us up, if we stand together, there is nothing we cannot accomplish. Now, the reason that this campaign is doing so well is we're doing something quite radical for contemporary American politics. We're telling the truth. And the truth is sometimes not very pleasant, but if you want to go forward as a nation, if we want to address the real problems, you got to look those problems straight in the eye. You know, we talk a lot about democracy in America, but let me be as clear as I can be. Right now, as a result of this disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court decision, we are living under a corrupt campaign finance system which is undermining American democracy. Democracy is not a radical idea. It means you got to vote, and you got to vote, and you got to vote. It does not mean that billionaires should be able to buy elections. It does not mean that Republican governors throughout this country should be able to suppress the vote and make it harder for people to participate in the democratic process. To my mind, democracy means that we should have, as a nation, the highest voting turnout rate of any major country, not one of the lowest. It means that anyone 18 years of age or older is registered to vote. End of discussion. We are taking on not just the corrupt campaign finance system, we are taking on a rigged economy. And here is what a rigged economy is about. A rigged economy is that over the last 25 years, the middle class has been in decline. We now have more people living in poverty than at any time in the history of the United States. And almost all of the new wealth in this country is going to the top 1/10 of 1%. A rigged economy is when today the top 1/10 of 1% now owns almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%. A rigged economy is when the 20 wealthiest people in this country, 20 people, now own more wealth than the bottom half of America, 150 million people. A rigged economy is when one family, the Walton family, owns more wealth than the bottom 42% of the American people. And here's what is especially nauseating about that. And that is the Walton family that owns Walmart pays their workers wages that are so low that many of those workers are forced to go on food stamps and Medicaid. And do you know who pays higher taxes for those food stamps and Medicaid? You do. A rigged economy is when the working class of this country is subsidizing the wealthiest family in this country. And I say to the Walton family, get off of welfare, pay your workers a living wage. A rigged economy is when, despite a major increase in technology and worker productivity, we have families all over this country where mom is working 40 hours a week, dad is working 40 hours a week, the kids are working, and people still are not earning enough income to pay the bills. That's a rigged economy. A rigged economy is when we have seen in recent years a major increase in the number of millionaires and billionaires in this country, while at the same time we have the highest rate of childhood poverty of almost any major country on earth. A rigged economy is when people are working 2 or 3 jobs and 58% of all new income goes to the top 1%. You ready for a radical idea? Together, we are going to create an economy that works for all of us, not just the 1%. We are going to tell the wealthiest people and the largest corporations who are doing extraordinarily well that, yes, they are going to start paying their fair share of taxes. And we are going to be loud and clear in stating that if you work 40 hours or 50 hours a week in this country, you will not be living in poverty, because we're going to raise the minimum wage to a living wage, $15 an hour. And when we talk about fair wages, I know that every man here will stand with the women in ending the disgrace of women making 79 cents on the dollar compared to men. Together, we are going to bring pay equity to this country, equal pay for equal work. Now, once a month, you're going to see on the front pages a report from the federal government talking about the unemployment rate. And what you see on the front pages says that nationally, unemployment is 5%. Anybody believe that? No. You're right, because there's another report that doesn't make the front pages, and that includes people who have given up looking for work and people who are working part-time when they want full-time jobs. If you add that together, real unemployment in this country is close to 10%. And then on top of that, in inner cities and in rural communities, you got unemployment rates much, much higher than that. That is why together we are going to develop a massive federal jobs program to put our people to work. There was once a time in America where we had the strongest infrastructure in the world, where we had the best roads and bridges and water systems and wastewater plants and rail and airports and levees and dams. That is no longer the case. Our infrastructure in many, many parts of this country is crumbling. We can put 13 million Americans back to work at good wages by rebuilding that infrastructure. Today, we should be hiring teachers, not firing teachers. Today, we should be hiring hundreds of thousands of well-trained, well-paid child care workers. Today, we should be hiring more doctors, more nurses, more medical professionals. And when we talk about why the middle class of this country has been in decline for 25 years, one of the reasons are the disastrous trade policies that corporate America has pushed on this country. It is not acceptable to me that since 2001, 60,000 factories in this country have shut down. It is not acceptable to me that week after week we read about factories being shut down and going to China. Our message to corporate America is, if you want us to buy your products, you better start manufacturing those products in America, not China. But this campaign is not just about ending a corrupt campaign finance system and a rigged economy. It is about dealing with a criminal justice system that is broken. It is a national disgrace that we have more people in jail than any other country on earth. We are spending $80 billion a year to lock up 2.2 million Americans, disproportionately African American, Latino, and Native Americans. I want this country to have the best educated population, not more people in jail. In inner cities in America, in inner cities throughout this country, and in rural communities, you have youth unemployment rates of 30, 40, 50%. And when you have kids hanging around, not in school, not working, bad things happen. My view is that we should invest in jobs and education for our young people, not in jails and incarceration. I want to see our young people doing important work and earning good wages. I want to see our young people getting the education that they need. I do not want to see our young people rotting away in jail cells. And when we talk about criminal justice reform, we also have to look at local police departments all across this country. Now, I was a mayor in Burlington, Vermont. You got anybody here from Vermont? All right. We're a small state, not a lot of people. I was the mayor for 8 years, and I worked closely with the police department there, and I've worked with police officers all over this country. The average police officer is honest, hardworking, and has a very difficult job. It is not easy being a cop today, but like any other public official, if a police officer breaks the law, that officer must be held accountable. In America, we must demilitarize local police departments. Police departments should not look like occupying armies. In America, we have got to make local police departments reflect the diversity of the communities they serve. We need a police culture across this country which says that lethal force, the killing of somebody, is the last response, not the first response. We need to end corporate ownership of prisons and detention centers. We need to rethink the so-called war on drugs. Many people don't know this, but over the last 30 years, millions of Americans have received police records which stay with them for their whole lives because of possession of marijuana. And if you are a 19-year-old kid going out and looking for a job, and you've got a police record, that makes it harder to get that job. A lot of lives have been ruined because of those police records. Today, as part of the Federal Controlled Substance Act, marijuana is listed as a Schedule I drug, amazingly right alongside of heroin. If elected president, we will take marijuana out of the Federal Controlled Substance Act. As all of you know, the decision about whether to legalize marijuana or not is a state decision. You've got a proposition on the ballot in November. And I personally think that proposition of legalizing marijuana makes sense. But when we talk about drugs, let us also be very clear. And that is that we have an epidemic and a crisis in this country in terms of opiate and heroin addiction. In my state and in New England and all across this country, we are seeing incredible large numbers of people becoming addicted, and every single day people are dying of overdose. Now, in my view, if we are going to be effective in addressing this crisis, we have got to look at substance abuse and addiction as a health issue, not a criminal issue. And I'm happy to tell you, more and more people in law enforcement understand that as well. And what that means is that we need a revolution in this country in mental health treatment. There are people who are addicted, who want to fight that addiction, but they cannot get the help they need. There are people in this country above and beyond addiction who are dealing with suicidal tendencies and, in fact, homicidal tendencies. We need to make sure those people get the treatment they need when they need it. This campaign is listening to the American people and not just to wealthy campaign contributors. All over this country, we see Republican senators and congressmen and governors talking about Republican family values. And you know and I know what Republican family values are. What Republican family values are telling every woman here tonight and every woman in America that she does not have the right to control her own body. I disagree. What Republican family values are is telling our gay brothers and sisters they do not have the right to get married. We disagree. Now, in 6 days, my wife Jane and I will have been married 28 years. And I am in very deep trouble if I forget that anniversary. So if you come to one of my rallies on the 28th, please remind me. But Jane and I, we believe in family values, but not Republican family values. And what we believe in is that the United States should end the international embarrassment of being the only major country on earth that does not guarantee paid family and medical leave. I want you to think about this. All over the world, in wealthy countries and actually in poorer countries, all of these people, all of these governments understand that when a mom has a baby, she should be able to stay home with that baby, get to know the baby, get to love the baby. And yet today, all over this country, if you are a working class woman who gives birth to a beautiful baby, you may be forced to go back to work in a week, 2 weeks, because you need the income to take care of your family. That is not a family value. That is the opposite of a family value. And that is why together we are going to pass legislation that guarantees 3 months paid family and medical leave. A great nation is not judged by how many billionaires it has or by how many nuclear weapons it has. A great nation is judged by how it treats the weakest and most vulnerable among us. Today in California, in Vermont, and all over this country, there are millions of seniors and disabled veterans and people with disabilities who are trying to survive on $10,000, $11,000 a year in Social Security. And if you can believe it, and it is true, many Republicans think that is too much. They want to cut Social Security. Well, we've got some very bad news for those Republicans. We are not going to cut Social Security. We are not going to cut the benefits that our veterans have deserved. We are going to expand Social Security. A great nation does not turn its back on our parents and our grandparents, the people who built this country. That is not what we do, and we don't turn our backs on the men and women who fought to defend this country. This campaign is listening to young people. And I want you to think outside of the box for a minute, outside of the options that corporate media gives to you. Think for a second. You all know, it's a no-brainer, that we are living in an increasingly competitive global economy. We need the best educated workforce in the world. Everybody knows that. And everybody knows that the economy has changed, that technology has changed, and that people today need more education than was the case 30 or 40 years ago. That's just a fact. In my view, when we talk about public education today, it is not good enough just to talk about first grade through 12th grade. That was great 50 years ago. Today, when we talk about public education, we must be including making public colleges and universities tuition free. As a nation, we should be encouraging all of our people, no matter what their age, to get as much education as they can. We should be rewarding people for getting an education, not punishing people. And I want you to think about this. I grew up in a family that did not have a lot of money. My parents never went to college. And there are kids right now in Irvine, throughout this country, in the 4th grade and the 6th grade, who are living in low-income families. Their parents never went to college. They don't know anybody who went to college. I want those children and their parents and their teachers to know that if those kids study hard and do well in school, regardless of the income of those families, they will be able to get a higher education. How many people here are dealing with student debt? It's a lot of people. I've been all over this country and I have seen thousands and thousands of people dealing with student debt as high as $400,000. A woman in my own city went to medical school. She's now working with low-income people doing great work. $300,000 in debt. Saw a kid in Iowa dropped out after 2 years, $60,000 in debt. Met a guy in Nevada. He has been in debt for 25 years. He's more in debt today than he was when he took out the loan in the first place. That is why I believe that people with student debt should be able to refinance those loans at the lowest interest rates they could find. Now, here is what thinking outside of the box is about. People say to me, my critics say, my opponent says, the establishment media says, Bernie, you're Santa Claus. You're giving away free tuition. Public colleges are going to lower student debt. How are you going to pay for it? Well, let me tell you exactly how we are going to pay for it. 8 years ago, against my vote, Congress bailed out Wall Street. Today, Wall Street is doing just fine. I believe that we need to impose a tax on Wall Street speculation. Which will bring in more than enough money to make public colleges and universities tuition free and lower substantially student debt. This campaign is listening to the Latino community. There, thank you. There are 11 million undocumented people in this country today. And let us be clear, some of those people are being exploited every day on the job, because if you don't have legal rights to stand up, your employer can rip you off. And those people are being underpaid and they are being cheated. We need in this country comprehensive immigration reform and a path toward citizenship. And if Congress does not do its job in fixing a broken immigration system, I will use the executive powers of the presidency to do all that I can. We must also end the current policies on deportation. Our job is to unite families, not to break them up. This campaign is listening to our African American brothers and sisters. And they are asking, how does it happen that we have had trillions of dollars to spend on a war in Iraq that we never should have gotten into, but somehow we don't have the funds to rebuild our crumbling inner cities? I have been to Flint, Michigan, where children were poisoned by drinking water with excessive amounts of lead in it. I have been to Detroit, where their public school system is on the verge of fiscal collapse. I have been to Baltimore, Maryland, where tens of thousands of people are addicted to heroin and can't get treatment. Together, we are going to change our national priorities. Instead of rebuilding the infrastructure of Afghanistan, we're going to rebuild the inner cities of this country. This campaign is listening to a people whose pain is almost never heard, and that is the Native American community. I have talked to tribal leaders in every part of this country, and I hope all of you appreciate that the debt we owe to the Native American people is so great that it can never actually ever be paid off. The painful truth is that even before this country became a country, where the first settlers came here, the Native American people were lied to, they were cheated, and the treaties they signed were broken. But the truth is that despite all of that, what the Native American people have given to us is a culture that has transformed this country. They have taught us so much, and maybe the most important lesson that they have taught us, a lesson that we cannot afford not to heed, is that as human beings, we are part of nature. We must live with nature. and that if we continue to destroy nature, we are destroying ourselves. And yet, despite all that the Native American people, the first Americans, have given us, today their economic conditions in many parts of this country is just awful. I was in the Pine Ridge Reservation a couple of weeks ago in South Dakota. Conditions there are worse than in many third world countries. Life expectancy for men on that reservation is 58 years of age. Most of the children are dropping out of school. Suicide rate among the young people is horrifically high. Healthcare system totally inadequate. And that is true in many Native American communities throughout this country. If elected president, we will change our relationship to the Native American people. When we begin to think outside of the box, we ask some important questions. And one of the key questions we ask is, how does it happen that in America today, we are the only major country not to guarantee health care to all people? Now, the Affordable Care Act, which I voted for, has done some good things. But today in America, 29 million people today have zero health insurance. Many of you are underinsured with high deductibles and high copayments. And every person here and every American is being ripped off unconscionably by the greed of the drug companies. Drug companies are charging us by far the highest prices in the world for the medicine we need, and yet the top 6 drug companies last year made over $50 billion in profit. Now, let me be as honest and straightforward with you as I can be. I believe from the depths of my soul that health care must be a right of all people, not a privilege. We lose many thousands of people every year because they don't get to the doctor when they should, because they don't have health insurance or they can't pay the deductibles. That is wrong. I want everybody, whether they are young or old, rich or poor, inner city or rural America, to know that they will be able to go to the doctor when they need to go to the doctor. And I want people to know that if they end up in the hospital, they will not have to pay off hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt to that hospital. The time is now for us to tell the private insurance industry that the function of health care is not to make them excessive profits. Together, we will join the rest of the industrialized world and pass a Medicare for all single-payer system. Everybody here understands a very profound lesson, and that is that real change never takes place from the top on down. It always takes place from the bottom on up. When workers 100+ years ago were working 7 days a week and 12 hours a day and had no rights, when children in Vermont and California were working in factories and losing their hands on machinery that was dangerous, what working people said is, you know what, we are human beings, we demand dignity, and we are going to form trade unions to protect the interest of working people. And millions of workers came together and helped to create the modern American middle class, and we thank them for that. Amidst, at the time of the abomination of slavery, we had African Americans and their allies looking to the future and saying that the day will come in America where we will rid this country of racism and bigotry and segregation. And we will never know the names of those people who died in that struggle, who went to jail in that struggle, who lost their jobs for standing up for civil rights and human dignity. But people stood up, they fought back. 100 years ago, and the children don't know this, 100 years ago in America, women did not have the right to vote, could not get the jobs or the education they wanted 100 years ago. But women stood up and said to the establishment, you will not define us. You will not. You will not tell us that our job is to stay home and have babies. We will define ourselves. And women and their male allies fought together by the millions to say that in America, women will not be second-class citizens. And that is how change happens. Change happens when, in recent history, with great courage, the gay community and their straight allies taking on incredible homophobia and bigotry, gay community stood up and said, you know what, in this country, people should have the right to love whoever they want, regardless of their gender. And today, despite the strong hatred and homophobia that remains, gay marriage is now legal in 50 states in this country. If we were here 5 years ago and somebody jumped up and said, you know, Bernie, the $7.25 an hour federal minimum wage is a starvation wage, we've got to raise it to $15 an hour, the person next to her would have said, you're crazy. You want to double the minimum wage, you want to go from 7.25 to 15, you're thinking too big, you're too radical. That's what people would have said. Maybe $9, maybe $10, 15, too much. But you know what happened? Think about it. Workers in the fast food industry, in McDonald's, in Burger King, in Wendy's, you know what they did? They went out on strike. And I am very proud to have demonstrated with those workers. And they said to their neighbors, and they said to this country, we can't live on $7.25 an hour. And then what happened a few years ago in Seattle, Washington? $15 an hour was passed. in Los Angeles, in San Francisco, in California, and in New York. In other words, what happened is something that people 10 years ago, 5 years ago, never believed could have happened. Real change took place. And that is the history of America. When people stand up and fight back, real change takes place. Now, I've been all over this country. We've talked to over 1.2 million people in gatherings like this. And what I have heard from coast to coast now is that people are beginning to look around them and go beyond the options that the media or the Congress is giving us. And they are beginning to understand that the choices that we face are not whether we cut food stamps or education or environmental protection. The choices that we face are whether we demand the wealthy and large corporations to start paying their fair share of taxes. And people are asking themselves, they're now beginning to think about it. Why does it happen in this country that the middle class continues to disappear while almost all new income and wealth goes to the top 1%? Why is that happening? Why does it happen that in California, in Vermont, and all over this country, we have 20% of our children living in poverty? Why does it happen that young people graduate school deeply in debt and others just can't afford to get the education they need? Why does it happen that we are not more aggressive in dealing with the global crisis of climate change? Why are we not telling the fossil fuel industry that their short-term profits are not more important than the future of this planet? Why is it that our infrastructure is disappearing and our inner cities are crumbling? Why is it that we are the only major country on earth not to guarantee paid family and medical leave and health care to all? And all over this country, people are beginning to ask those questions. And what this campaign is about is bringing people together to demand that we have a government that represents all of us, not just the people on top. That we create a government that does not cut Social Security or give tax breaks to billionaires, but addresses the pain of the American working class and middle class. There is nothing that I have said this evening that is not supported by the vast majority of the American people. Nothing is radical. But together, we have got to create a government that listens to us, not just wealthy campaign contributors. And that is what this campaign is about. Now, on June 7th, there is going to be, as you know, a primary here in California. 475 delegates are at stake. If there is a large voter turnout, we will win a strong majority of those delegates. On June 7th, let us see California having the largest voter turnout in Democratic primary history. And let this great state, one of the most progressive states in America, tell the world you're going to lead us into the political revolution. Thank you all.
Another fantastic rally. Bernie Sanders live from Irvine. And yeah, our camera guy with a very unique perspective on the camera angles there. Appreciate the feed from CBS 8 at CBS 8. Thank you very much because we had nothing. Sorry, guys. And we have been watching that. I've been watching CBS 8 before, and it was Bill Clinton. And I just couldn't stand monitoring it anymore. I couldn't stand listening to Skeletor's manservant talk about how America was. If you haven't heard Bill Clinton's, whatever he does, his pander speech there to help his wife, he basically says America's great, doing fine. We've never heard such crap. Anyway, that was Bernie Sanders, and he was phenomenal and inspiring and amazing. And we've got more than 700 people here. You guys rock. Thank you for being here. If you have a few minutes, Bernie was talking about the environment, which is, in my opinion, the most important thing. And I really think, I was going to play this at the beginning, but we didn't get a chance. I really think you should listen to this. This is, and he apparently opened for Bernie Sanders. Cenk Uygur has made a very nice statement about climate. It's changed. And he says the same things that I've been saying for quite some time. He does them in his way, much more eloquently, and I just think it's worth listening to since I got a whole bunch of you here. So just take 6 minutes and 40 seconds to listen to Cenk Uygur on climate.
So some warn of climate change and the disastrous results that might happen later. Well, I'm here to tell you it's not later, it's right now. The climate isn't going to change, it is changing. Climate has changed. Let me show you a graph of temperature throughout the decades. So you see that graph starts in 1880 and goes up to the present. Oh, it looks like it might be going up, and by a lot. So that's our temperature and globally, and people are still arguing with it. Like, oh, math, science, nah. Temperature's going up all across the world in a dramatic way. Probably liberal propaganda. I know. Reality has a well-known liberal bias. Okay, let's get more specific. Based on NASA data, April was the 7th month in a row that global temperatures set a new record high. It was also the 3rd consecutive month that the record was broken by the largest margin ever. Okay, so that's April, and that's, well, also 7 months in a row, all disastrously high record temperatures. Gavin Schmidt, director of NASA's Goddard Institute for Space Studies, said there is a greater than 99% chance that 2016 will be the hottest year ever recorded. Other experts have also warned that this year will likely surpass the previous annual record set in 2015, and by the largest ever margin. So every year we're setting records, and every year the record is by a larger margin. Gee, I wonder if the Earth is warming as we speak, right now, today. It's not a question, it's a fact. Any politician that tells you otherwise not only is a liar, but knows that they are lying. It's not like they haven't been presented with this evidence. They know and they go, well, that's your evidence. On the other hand, the evidence on the other side is a big fat check from oil and gas companies. Well, that check tells me that climate change isn't happening. Okay. So climate scientists, according to Andy Pittman, who is the ARC Center of Excellence for Climate System Science Director, climate scientists have been warning about this since at least the 1980s, and it's been bloody obvious since the 2000s, so where's the surprise? The interesting thing, Pittman continues, is the scale at which we're breaking records. It's clearly all heading in the wrong direction. And by the way, let me criticize myself here. Jesus, if you can, go back to graphic 15 for me, okay? Because back in the 1980s, as Pittman was referring to there, and you can see it in the chart, you had some movement up, but it was, you could say, hey, look, that's about the same place where they were in 1940 and back in the 80s, and then the 90s, and now it's starting to go up a little bit more. I was among the ones who were skeptical. So I didn't listen to the Al Gores of the world, and I said, look, the jury's still out. Well, what has happened since is the rest of that graph. Even if you were in that camp as I was, well, the jury has come in. Now, if you're a person who actually cares about facts, reason, and logic, you look at that chart and go, I got it, it's done. The climate is changing right now. We're in the middle of that change. It's not later, it's today. And the evidence isn't unclear, it's startlingly clear. Record after record, biggest margin ever, one after another after another. Almost all the world's scientists say, yes, climate change is happening right now. Yes, it's man-made. The jury is in. The only people who aren't listening to that jury are the ones who are bought not to listen to that jury. And by the way, is it going to have consequences later? No, it's going to have consequences right now, and let me tell you about that. From a different story now, natural disasters now affect over 170 million people every year, up from 60 million just 3 decades ago. The total cost of destructive storms, floods, and droughts has jumped from $14 billion to $40 billion annually. Now, give full context there. There's more people in the world than there was 3 decades ago. And even if you had a storm as large today, it might affect more property and has cost more money overall, right? Even when you factor that in, still the scale of the storms and the disasters that they are causing, both in human terms and in financial terms, are significantly higher than they were 3 decades ago. Because the jury is in, the climate isn't going to change, it has changed. And the people who recognize this, by the way, are the insurance industries that are now turning to the government and going, look, my business is based on this. And I think that my rates would be astronomical if I actually figured in the real cost of the storms that are not only coming, but that are already here. I need the government to help me because I can't pay for all this disaster. The U.S. militaries across the world, getting ready for the consequences of this climate change. So the conservatives who deny this because they listen to the propaganda from their bought talk show hosts and bought politicians. Let me ask you something. You always talk about how the military is so great, the U.S. military. What, you don't believe the U.S. military? The U.S. military says the climate change is happening right now, and they are planning to make sure that it does not cause worldwide havoc. They're not doing that for their health. They're doing it because we're in the middle of climate change. If we don't do something about it soon, we're literally in for a world of trouble. The only people who are against it are the ones that are making all the profits from putting all that carbon in the air. Isn't it interesting that we bear all the costs, but they get all the profits? This is the crony capitalism we have today in America, where you privatize the gains, but you socialize the losses. So, record-breaking profits for the oil companies. They're all in the top 10 most profitable companies in the world, but record-breaking heat and storms for the rest of us. So the profits they make, they take home, but the costs are for all of us to bear. Does that sound fair to you?
I couldn't have said it better. I don't. That was beautiful, Cenk. And actually, the costs are not for all of us to bear because Exxon doesn't pay taxes. None of the fossil fuel companies pay taxes. As a matter of fact, they get our money back. So they get paid to destroy our planet. And they charge us money at the gas pump. Yeah. So if anything makes you want to just jump up and get that political revolution going on fast track, it would be that and the fact that we're going to die if we don't do something about it. It's not about electing one person or another, really. It's about ending our use of fossil fuels before this planet turns into such a dystopian hellhole we can't fix it. And there are many scientists who think we can't. We're far beyond that eve of destruction. And I appreciate Cenk and his rawness and his honesty there. I was fooled by Bill Clinton in the 90s, so I'll admit that. And, there are a lot of people who didn't believe the climate science. I was not one of them because I was a big nerd into science at the time, back in the early 80s when I first became aware. However, when you are fed a narrative, as Cenk was, as all of us were, when you're fed a narrative and you're unsure what to think about that narrative, and it seeds doubt, it sows doubt into the populace, that's why I hold the media more responsible than anybody else for the fate of our planet. People like Les Moonves, who's an executive who thought Trump was great for ratings, not so good for the American people, but he didn't give a shit. People like Les Moonves should be tried for crimes against humanity and, in my mind, lined up against a wall with a bunch of guys. But that's just me. And no, I'm not advocating violence. I'm advocating justice. Because when you've committed crimes against an entire planet of species, when you have knowingly done this for 40 plus years, you knew you had to stop, you knew you needed to stop a long time ago, and you continue to do the things you knew you needed to stop and charge us for those things and not do anything about it, you are basically the biggest super criminals ever in the history of the universe, and you need to be treated as such. And I don't know about you, you think of all the super criminals we've had in the past and what we've done to them, there you go. I don't need to advocate violence. I just need to advocate justice. You tell me what justice is deserving of Exxon CEOs who have destroyed our planet and brought us to the sixth greatest extinction. The sixth great extinction. We did that. We did that. Wasn't geological. It wasn't an asteroid. The human species, supposedly the most intelligent species on planet Earth, brought about the sixth great extinction due to profit and greed from the fossil fuel industry, and we are paying them back for it. Have our tax dollars. Anybody who wants to continue Obama's legacy, that's Obama's legacy, and I'd like to stop that right now. And in 10 years, it may not matter anyway, folks. I'm betting on science. Anyway, guys, I didn't mean to end on a downer. It's not really. This is our moment in history. This is it. We are right on that choice. Do we save Earth? And do we evolve to a new level of existence together on this planet like we know we can? Or do we fall into complete dystopia first and then maybe rebuild with whatever's left? That's really what our choices are right now. Clock is ticking. We were supposed to make this decision 20 years ago. So now we're going to have to really work fast together, and we are. Bernie Sanders is kicking ass. We're kicking ass. You guys are phenomenal. I want to say thank you to everybody in Bernie 2016 TV, politicalrevolution.tv, Global Engagement Network, and the entire industry that's being built right now by people, volunteers, building a media network to replace the bullshit ones that we have right now, and to work alongside with networks like TYT and Free Speech TV. This is a dream come true for me, for a lot of people here, to deliver the truth to you guys, have a conversation. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, comment mods. We had so many today. We had Bad Wolf and Kara and Rob and Alice and Eddie. Hey, Eddie. So we had a ton of people. This is the power of working together, right? Thank you for being here, for being a part of the great conversation. We're going to go out with Gil Scott-Heron. The revolution will not be televised. It will be streamed. But if you're not paying attention to the stream, you're not hearing the truth. And so we have to drag everybody still stuck on the tube away from that bullshit and out to the internet where the truth is. Gil Scott-Heron. Feel the burn, everybody. The revolution will be streamed.
You will not be able to stay home, brother. You will not be able to plug in, turn on, and cop out. You will not be able to lose yourself on Skag and skip out for beer during commercials because the revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be brought to you by Xerox in 4 parts without commercial interruptions. The revolution will not show you pictures of Nixon blowing a bugle and leading a charge by John Mitchell, General Abrams, and Spyro Agnew to eat hog maws confiscated from a Harlem sanctuary. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be brought to you by the Schaefer Award Theater and will not star Natalie Woods and Steve McQueen or Bullwinkle and Julia. The revolution will not give your mouth sex appeal. The revolution will not get rid of the nub. The revolution will not make you look 5 pounds thinner because the revolution will not be televised, brother. There will be no pictures of you and Willie Mae pushing that shopping cart down the block on the dead run or trying to slide that color TV into a stolen ambulance. NBC will not be able to predict the winner at 8:32 on Report from 29 District. The revolution will not be televised. There will be no pictures of pigs shooting down brothers on the instant replay. There will be no pictures of pigs shooting down brothers on the instant replay. There will be no pictures of Whitney Young being run out of Harlem on a rail with a brand new process. There will be no slow motion or still life of Roy Wilkins strolling through Watts in a red, black, and green liberation jumpsuit that he has been saving for just the proper occasion. Green Acres, Beverly Hillbillies, and Hooterville Junction will no longer be so damn relevant, and women will not care if Dick finally got down with Jane on Search for Tomorrow, because black people will be in the street looking for a brighter day. The revolution will not be televised. There will be no highlights on the 11 o'clock news and no pictures of Harry R. Women liberationists and Jackie Onassis blowing her nose. The theme song will not be written by Jim Webb or Francis Scott Keys, nor sung by Glenn Campbell, Tom Jones, Johnny Cash, Engelbert Humperdinck, or The Rare Earth. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be right back after a message about a white tornado, white lightning, or white people. You will not have to worry about a dove in your bedroom, the tiger in your tank, or the giant in your toilet bowl. The revolution will not go better with coke. The revolution will not fight germs that may cause bad breath. The revolution will put you in the driver's seat. The revolution will not be televised, will not be televised, will not be televised, will not be televised. The revolution will be no rerun, brothers. The revolution will be live.
Huge